Department of Agriculture. I'm here also along here with Lindsay McClintock. She's our state's milk rating officer here for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. So, currently Kansas has around 244 licensed grade A dairies across the state, which produce approximately about 3.8 billion pounds of milk annually. And a large portion of that milk is trucked to one of our 17 licensed manufacturing plants to be pasteurized and made into various dairy products and then shipped to retail stores. So due to the new climate and the growing interest of consumers buying products directly from farmers, we want to touch on what type of dairy products can be sold in Kansas. We also want to provide you with some basic requirements for licensed on-the-farm processors for those that may be interested in this type of business. So with that said, what type of dairy products can be sold directly to consumers here in Kansas? Well, there are basically two types of dairy products that can be sold, and that's pasteurized and unpasteurized. So let me touch on that a little. So any pasteurized dairy product produced from a licensed grade A dairy may be sold directly to consumers from a grade A dairy plant. Let me specify. Must be a plant. So any raw milk or raw milk product can also be sold directly to consumers as long as a consumer purchased such product from the farm in which that product was produced. So it must be purchased from the farm. Some of you may ask the question as to why raw milk and raw milk products must be sold on the farm only. The answer to that is because the Kansas dairy law has a definition in statute that only allows the sale of raw or unpasteurized dairy products to be purchased on the farm in which the product was produced. The thought process behind this law is buyer awareness. By requiring the purchase of raw milk to happen on the farm in which the raw milk is produced allows the consumer to make an observation of the farm and decide if he or she wants to purchase raw milk from that particular farm. Prior to a recent consent judgment regarding this statute, the advertisement of such raw milk and raw milk products was only allowed by the placement of a sign inside the barnyard. Since there was a ruling back in November 2019 that deemed the advertisement portion of this statute unconstitutional, producers of raw milk and raw milk products may now advertise outside of the farm, but all sales must be conducted on the farm. Knowing that raw milk and raw dairy products are only allowed to be sold from the farm, the dairy program still gets the frequently asked questions about selling raw dairy products at farmers markets. This leads to my next question. Can raw milk or raw milk products be sold at farmers markets from unlicensed dairy producers? The answer to this question is no. Raw milk or raw milk products produced from an unlicensed dairy facility in Kansas are not allowed to be sold at farmers markets. Only certain cheeses, such as raw aged cheddar cheese produced and manufactured at a licensed dairy facility, may be sold at farmers markets. Keep in mind these licensed facilities that do sell and ship raw cheese are licensed and inspected and must follow strict guidelines such as aging the cheese in a monitored temperature-controlled environment in which it must be aged for at least 60 days. There are several different types of dairy products manufactured here in Kansas, but in the short answer to what can be sold directly to consumers in Kansas are such products produced and manufactured by licensed grade A dairy facilities, or raw milk and raw milk products produced by unlicensed dairy facilities, which can only be sold on the farm. I hope this information I provided you is helpful and has answered some of your questions you may have regarding dairy sales in Kansas. With that, I would like to give the mic over to Lindsay McClintock to discuss some basic requirements for license on the farm processing, along with what it takes to become a licensed facility in Kansas.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindsay McClintock. I am a milk rating officer and was a dairy inspector, and I've been with the dairy program for about 5 years now. So I'm going to start off when it comes to grade A dairy. The grade A dairy application is free. Everybody loves to hear the word free. So if you're interested in that, those forms are on our Kansas Department of Ag website at www.agriculture.ks.gov. Those will be under the divisions and programs, and it'll be a list, and then there'll be dairy inspection, or dairy industry, then dairy inspection. Under there, you'll show our inspectors, and their areas are divided up throughout the state of Kansas. The dairy application form is F1. So another note, if you are interested in having or becoming a dairy, you will need to, especially a new dairy, you will need to have floor plans. Those floor plans will need to be submitted to us, the regulatory agency, and we will approve those before you can start. And that'll be by looking at the site, and along your construction progress, we will come out and do inspections during that to make sure everything is meeting the requirements, so that way there's no having to change anything, because that can get costly. So when it comes to a location of your dairy facility, the best place, of course, is to have a well-maintained road for whether it be customers or if you're selling your milk to a co-op. That way the semi and the tanker can get down your road and not get stuck. It's best to have any of all the dirt slope away from your dairy facility, so that way there's no pooling of water inside your dairy barn. When it comes to your sewage system, we've got making sure that there's no mixing of any human or animal waste. So human waste would have to go to a septic system. Your animal waste would need to go to a lagoon. And to make sure that your lagoon would be in the appropriate location, they have a percolation test are recommended for absorption fields. When it comes to toilet facilities or bathrooms, every dairy facility, it's beneficial to have one. It's not required. The types of bathrooms you can have, of course, are flush toilets. They must be well ventilated, well lit, must have a tight self-closing door, and you can use chemical toilets on dairy farms. When it comes to the size of your milk house, which your milk house will be where your raw milk or your bulk tank will be stored, there will need to be a requirement for making sure it's large enough for any working room inside there. So you have about 36 inches from the tank to the wall or other equipment. And then on your back side of your tank, about 24 inches. For your floors, anything that be concrete or impervious material. All the floors, of course, will need to slope to a drain. No drain can be directly underneath any outlet valve for your from your bulk tank. All drains must be bell trapped and P-trapped. And there is a minimum of 2 drains per milk house. Any wash vat and hand washing facilities will need to be trapped and plumbed to drains. All drains shall terminate outside the cow yard and into a lagoon or any other surface area. So when it comes to the walls and the ceilings of your milk house, which is where your bulk tank will be, your walls, floors, and ceiling, they'll all need to be light colored, smooth, be able to handle a lot of moisture. There's lots of cleaning that goes on there. The ceiling height has a minimum of 8 feet. and it's beneficial if any of your window sills and ledges are sloping downward to help keep water from pooling in there. And then for parlors, there's a minimum ceiling height of 7 feet. When it comes to lighting, windows, natural lighting, those are the best source for any light. When it comes to artificial light, needing a minimum of 20-foot candles for cleaning purposes, using of shatterproof covers and shatterproof bulbs. For the parlor, in the pit, there's a minimum, or must be at least 10-foot candles in all working areas. And for when it comes to ventilation, for the parlor and the milk house, just to help reduce, moisture and odors, getting any mold buildup or anything, like an exhaust fan or like a tight flue, making sure that there's a fan, and if it does, it pulls air from your milk house and to the outside. And the ventilation fan cannot be directly over your milk bulk tank opening. And there is a requirement for the milk house room. It must be no less than 40 degrees Fahrenheit within the room. So it has to be above freezing in there. So for the dairy, they would need to have a 2-compartment wash vat. Every hand washing facility would need to have hot and cold water, and they would also need to have soap, paper towels, mainly for your hauler or for anyone within the facility needing to wash hand washing facilities. When it comes to any kind of shelves or racks that you would like to have in your milk house, making sure that those are smooth. They can handle a lot of moisture again and not get rotted away. So when it comes to bulk tanks, if you have decided to have a bulk tank that is bulkheaded, the vented part of your bulk tank would need to be in the milk house, so it cannot be vented to the outside, mainly to help prevent any kind of dust, insects, or anything entering into your milk supply. And if it is bulkheaded, the outside legs of your tank would need to be on some concrete to help prevent any kind of settling or unleveling of that tank, because your tanks will be calibrated. So, and then if you have your agitators for your bulkhead or for your bulk tank, you would need to have like an agitator shaft protector, which is usually a plexiglass material, and that helps prevent any insects and dust from getting inside of your milk supply as well. If you are interested, it's a little off topic, but if you're interested in milking goats, we would need to have your milk goat herd tested for TB and tuberculosis. This is a one-time test, but it would of course need to be negative, and then the results of those tests would need to be available on your farm for us to look at. So when it comes to holding areas, would be the area for the cattle coming into the parlor. Those would all need to be concrete. They need to be sloped and graded away from your dairy barn. So they cannot hold any water. They can't be cracked or anything like that. Must be easily cleanable. When it comes to manure, so any manure that is scooped or scraped from your holding pen or any of the places where your cattle are housed, those of course would need to be inaccessible to any of the cattle. And then if you have a liquid manure disposal facility, it would need to be designed, of course, in accordance with our current PMO. If you have manure lagoons, those are to be designated in accordance with the requirements of the KDH&E. When it comes to, we're going to move on to wells. When it comes to your wells, making sure that your well is at least 50 feet away from any source that could contaminate your water supply. So we keep that kind of vague, especially, if it would be for the cattle or house, you would want to make sure that your well is at least 50 feet away from that or any lagoons. So for the construction of your wells, you would want to make sure that there is no possibility of any contamination of groundwater for your well. So your well would need to be cased. It would need to terminate above ground level, and it would need to be with watertight cement, grout, or clay, and a minimum of 10 feet below the groundwater. Well covers and seals, they should be provided with an overlapping, tight-fitting cover, the top of the casing or pipe sleeve, to prevent any contaminated water or other material from entering the well. So a sanitary well seal in a well exposed to possible flooding shall be either watertight or elevated at least 2 feet above the highest known flood level. And then all water wells shall be readily accessible at the top for inspection and servicing. This requires any structure over the well be easily removable to provide a full unobstructed access for well servicing equipment. And if your well has a vent opening, that would need to be screened it would need to be turned down, I should say, and screened with a corrosive resistant screen, not less than a 16 by 20 mesh. So that's for your dairy, and we're going to move on. I'm going to cover a little bit on your plants. So for the dairy plant, a dairy manufacturing plant license is $200 a year. This form, of course, can be found on our website as well. And for some requirements for a plant would be to have a restroom that is well ventilated and well lit. No restroom shall open and onto a processing floor, and bathrooms must have a tight-fitting, self-closing door. No chemical toilets. Floors, walls, ceiling, ventilation, and doors will all meet the same requirements as a dairy farm. Wells can be used for plants, but they will need to be sampled every 6 months and meet the same construction requirements as dairy farms. There must be a separate room for any cleaning of milk cans, any milk cases, and for the receiving of milk, whether it be coming from your own farm or coming from another farm. Floors, of course, are constructed of concrete and impervious material, very similar to the dairy farms. And all drains must be trapped. And any storage rooms for any dry ingredients, packaged dry milk or milk products. Those rooms would not need to have a drain, and the floors can be constructed of tightly joined wood. You would also need to have a lab area for testing your milk for antibiotics. And then if you decide to do pasteurization of your milk, you would need to have some pasteurization equipment. Most popular for especially smaller farms or on the farm processors, they have what people call a vat. And a vat is a very large scale, like a pot on your stove is what it would be. And with that, the milk is pasteurized at 145 degrees for 30 minutes. So by using time and temperature, that ensures that the milk is pasteurized and agitation during that time. So with those, there's some bigger plants that have HTSTs, which are high temperature, short time pasteurization systems. But all that equipment would need to meet 3A sanitary standards and be stainless steel. You would need to have sanitizers that would be approved by us, and if they're when it comes to CIPing, which is clean in place, you would be doing that for any of your tankers or bulk tanks. Those would we would of course need to know about their sanitizers. There would be a temperature of their water would be very important for your plant. And if you do not have a CIP system for your plant, for your silos or your tankers, we do allow, if you do manual cleaning on them, we do allow that to happen. You don't have to have a CIP chart. You would just need to keep documentation as to the date, time, what chemicals you used, what you cleaned, and the initials of the person that was doing the cleaning. And so once your product has been pasteurized and you're ready to sell it, you would be looking at labeling your product. So when it comes to labeling your product, we have a few requirements for that. It must say grade A. It would need to have your plant identification number or a name on there somewhere. You would need to put refrigerate after opening, of course, if it's milk or whatever. And then you would also need to make sure that it's labeled with what animal produced that product. So if you had goat milk, you would have to make sure that there's goat on there. Or if you had sheep, water buffalo, camel, or other hoofed animal, that would need to be labeled on there as well. And there would also need to have on there how you would people would contact you if there was any questions or concerns. So an email, phone number, or a physical address. So that is going through some of the requirements when it comes to dairy farms. These are the requirements we have for grade A dairy farms and being a licensed facility. You do not have to have, dairy and a plant. You can be a dairy, become grade A, and you can sell your milk to a co-op. There are a couple co-ops still here in the state of Kansas. We have Dairy Farmers of America and Central Equity Supply, and I believe they're based out of Springfield, I believe. So let's kind of run through a few of those. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to put some in the chat box. And that is all I have for the dairy portion of your webinar.
All right, thanks, Jeff and Lindsay. Is anybody have any questions? We'll probably be getting kicked out of our breakout rooms here in a minute or so. So, anybody have any questions? Any other comments or anything you need to, while we're still here? Covered a lot of stuff. Again, if you missed anything, this is getting recorded, so you can come back when we get it posted on our website and listen to it again. Lots of stuff to cover there. It's lots of regulations. So, all right, we're about to get kicked out of our break room in about 20 seconds. So we'll go back out to the main group here. So thank you, Jeff and Lindsay. We appreciate all your information today.